second session of this seminar. Two eminent professors, Professor Sunita Sengupta and Swami Nikhilesh will make the presentations. Professor Sunita Sengupta is Professor of Management in the Delhi University, and Swami Nikhilesh is the head of our center in Baroda, in Vadodara. He is well known in management circles. He has been trying to apply Swamiji. He has been trying to spread the message of Swamiji among the management circles. I request Professor Sunita Sengupta to make her presentation.
Standing today here, it's a tremendous blessing of Thakur to me. I was initiated by Swami Rangnath Anandji Maharaj in 2003 on 15th July. Swami Sarvapriyananda was instrumental in helping me to get inside Belur Math. 2005 I moved out of IIM Calcutta after spending 10 years there, and I moved out to Delhi University with a call for work for me to spread the teachings of Thakur in the business school. I am thankful to Dr. Nirmal Chakraborty, whom I met at ICTR and who recommended my name, and here I stand. For quite some time I have been working on Vedic foundations of Indian management through international and national conferences and series of researches. So when I was contacted, I thought, let me speak on Swami Vivekananda's vision of Indian management. Though I have been referring Swami Vivekananda in my different deliberations, however, this is my first chance, first opportunity to talk exclusively on Swamiji. I have been speaking on Thakur, mostly Thakur. So I may be excused by this august gathering if if you feel that some incoherence is there. This is my first presentation on Swamiji. May Thakur give me courage to speak. The recent incidences of corporate fraud and the economic recession, starting from Raju to Radia, Radia to Rajat, and that brings us to the core of the problem, a total lack of conscience and bankruptcy in the corporate sector. So, we need to have a change in management paradigm. The clarion call is to integrate spiritual practices with business practices. And this will lead towards creating a harmony and sustainable excellence. Then in 1951, after independence, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru felt the need to have more managers for PSUs, and then he calls George Robbins from UCLA, and he comes and he says that I want to create an All India Institute of Management. In 1951, George Robbins was known for his courses on ethics and corporate strategies. How come no course was designed on ethics until very recently? IIM Calcutta coming up with MCHV with Professor S.K. Chakraborty taking the lead. That is very surprising. 1951, and it's almost 51-52 years, and we find a collapse of the model. Does it mean that there was no management model prior to that? The greatest spiritual leader of 18th century, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, sitting on the shore of river Ganges saying, Mati, Taka, Taka, Mati. This one line have tremendous implications today when we talk about how attachment to incentives is leading to the collapse of organization and degrading values in the individuals working in the organization. We need to integrate it with the modern management practices. So the role of greed and the malaise of modern organizations, we have the list can keep on increasing, which has led to the declining graph of the organization. So when greed comes into the picture, the graph of the organization goes down. Whatever you take, it is bound to go down. So the insights are the role of greed and covetousness of the players, impact on internal as well as external environment of the organization, and it creates a culture of intra-psychic conflict within the individuals and the leader. There are two models, greed-based model. We all know that the first reference of ancient Indian corporate entity is found in 800 BC in Rig Veda. And the Western model comes out from leveraged buyout, the credit system, and we see the result of that credit system. So the greed-based management, a management graduate who enters a BE school is more concerned about the package at the end of the 2 years rather than the learning in the process. So how can we, greed is not bad. Sri Aurobindo writes greed in its original form is divine in nature. We worship Lakshmi, but Lakshmi with Narayan, and Narayan is the consciousness, and that's exactly the spirit. If we remove the consciousness, it's sheer greed, and sheer greed will lead us to nowhere. So second model, which has already been prevalent in India, is the inspiration based model. When Ram Kumar wanted Thakur to come to Dakshineshwar, and he said that you learn Sanskrit because you will get a job because of that. Thakur said, which is quoted from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, brother, what shall I do with a mere bread-winning education? I would rather acquire that wisdom which will illumine my heart and give me satisfaction forever. Thakur's these two lines are the base of all the initiatives that we have taken with the blessings of Thakur on Vedic foundations of Indian management. Swamiji says everything that is excellent will come when the sleeping soul is aroused to self-conscious activity. Now I will share some of the reflections from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda and try to integrate it towards the end of my deliberation. Swamiji's letter, Chicago, 2nd November 1894 to Alasinga. He writes, the Hindus must not give up his religion but must keep religion within its proper limits and give freedom to society to grow. So the focus was on society to grow. Beginning from Buddha down to Ram Mohan Roy, everyone made the mistake of holding caste to be a religious institution and tried to pull down religion and caste altogether and failed. But in spite of all the ravings of the priest, caste is simply a crystallized social institution. Then he further keeps on talking and he says, giving back people its lost social individuality. So that this was the concern of Swamiji. Every man born in India knows he is a slave of society. Freedom is the only condition of growth. So the whole concept of Swamiji was focused on the growth of self and leading to the growth of the society. With the introduction of modern competition, see how caste is disappearing fast, and that's what we find that Swamiji, the receptivity, the openness in the deliberation of Swamiji, which is so remarkable. No man is prohibited from doing anything he pleases for his livelihood under the present government, and the result is neck and neck competition. And thus thousands are seeking and finding the highest level they were born for instead of vegetating at the bottom. This is Ramraj. We talk about Ramraj long back. But what Swamiji talked about, this is actual Ramraj where I am able to do what I really want to do. Swamiji's letter, Chicago, 28 December 1893 to Haripada. In India, there is howling cry that we are very poor. But how many charitable associations are there for the well-being of the poor? What are we doing for their livelihood, for their improvement? So concerned for the masses. Swamiji's letter to his disciples in Madras, 24th January 1894. My whole ambition of life is to set in motion a machinery which will bring noble ideas to the door of everybody, and then let men and women settle their own fate. The knowledge management that the Swamiji talked about, keeping the motto before you, elevation of the masses without injuring their religion. That's what perhaps what I feel Mahatma Gandhi must have been inspired by Swamiji's and talking about the trusteeship theory. Remember that the nation lives in the cottage. The fate of a nation depends upon the condition of masses. So further he says, I care only for the spirit. When that is right, everything will be righted by itself. So the conscience in the people, while this comes from his, again from his 27th September 1894, always depending on the Lord and making no plans ahead, was what Swamiji talked in Swamiji's letter from Washington, 27th October 1894. Thakur says, if a man has the conviction that God alone is the doer and he is his instrument, then he cannot do anything sinful. He who has learned to dance correctly never makes a false step. So the message is, how can the two, the guru and the disciple, talking the same thing, how can we create conscience mechanism in the organization so that people take charge of their own self? Swamiji says, doesn't matter how much laws you make for the ethical laws, but you cannot control people because there are the internal laws that govern people. So Swamiji advocates the idea, let us control ourselves from within. Secular outlook of Swamiji for India, writing in 1899, he said, what we should have is what we have not. Perhaps what our forefathers even had not, and that which the Yavanas had, that impelled by the life vibration of which is issuing forth in rapid succession from the great dynamo of Europe, the electric flow of a tremendous power vivifying the whole world. We want that. So he was full of energy, wanted to see India grow in its breadth and its length. We want that energy, that love of independence, that the spirit of self-sacrifice, that immovable fortitude, that dexterity in action, that bond of unity of purpose, that thirst for improvement. That's what Swamiji focused on. How can we create that culture? How can we put Swamiji's vision into action in today's time? It is very relevant. Checking a little constant, looking back to the past, we want that expansive vision infinitely projected forward, and we want that intense spirit of activity which will flow through our vein from head to foot. So how can we, this will help us in controlling the inertia in the organization, connecting it with the spiritual ideas of Swamiji. So his emphasis was, first make the people of the country stand on the legs by rousing their inner power. First let them learn to have good food and clothes and plenty of enjoyment, and then tell them how to be free from the bondage of enjoyment. So the methods and means, what is discussed, he favored ancient way of a small-scale industry, but he was not against large-scale production. He was against the machinery way of functioning which kills creativity, and that's what he talks about, doing routine work like a machine. One becomes a lifeless machine. For that reason, one serving as a schoolmaster or a clerk for a whole lifetime ends by turning a stupendous fool. Swamiji always looked at the West with an open mind and always said, let's merge the best of East and West. You must learn the power of organization of the Europeans. The Hindus have to learn a little bit of materialism from the West. You have not the capacity to manufacture a needle and you dare to criticize the English. Fools, sit at their feet and learn from them the arts, industries and the practicality necessary for the struggle of existence. Surely Swamiji's move was towards of Swamiji's whole idea, it would be better if the people got a little technical education that they might find work and earn their bread instead of dawdling about and crying for service. So, still not aid was his focus. What you have to do is to establish a mutt in every town, in every village. A well-educated sadhu should be at the head of that center, and under him there should be departments for teaching practical science and arts with a specialist sannyasin in charge of those departments. He was talking at that point of time spiritual leadership. We have been now working on spiritual leadership for business transformation, and it came as a guideline from Thakur to me to now to go into the writings of Swamiji and see how much we can get out of that. We need technical education and all else which may develop the industry so that men, instead of seeking for service, may earn enough to provide for themselves and save something against the rainy day. So how we can make our own country self-reliant. Some more reflections. When he said, he writes in his letter to Madrasi disciples from his way to Japan, to America, he says that if I can get some unmarried graduates, I may try to send them over to Japan and make arrangements for their technical education there, so that when they come back, they may turn their knowledge to the best account for India. What a good thing will that be? There in Japan, you find a fine assimilation of knowledge and not its indigestion as we have here. They have taken everything from the Europeans, but they remain Japanese all the same and have not turned European. So, Swamiji emphasized on spirit, Indian spirit at heart, and learning their skills from West. We have a very beautiful combination of skill and character development from the writings of Swamiji. So, focus on science and technology. In page 201 and 2, he writes, a tremendous power which the West exerts over the world lies in its material development of the forces of nature through the application of science, in its power of organization, cooperation, dexterity in action, intense energy. The East, on the other hand, bent on the realization of the transcendental verities of life, never developed the above traits to an appreciable extent and can never combat the West on its own grounds, as the latter cannot approach the East in the spiritual sphere. So it was very good, very insightful to see how Swamiji realized our own shortcomings and gave a call to develop on that. The salvation of the West depends as much upon the acceptance of the highest rationalistic principles of Vedanta as that of the East upon the learning and the practical application of the sciences from the West. Science coupled with Vedanta was the ideal. This is what Swamiji is writing. Tell us, thus India would ever acknowledge grew to the West in religion, and the latter would be the teacher to India in material science, and mutual respect, faith and sympathy is what he preached. So Swamiji emphasized merging the two, not negating West at the cost of East. In Bengali literature, there is a piece which talks about writing about the future development of the central monastery. The Swami says, now the idea is to develop his mutt by degrees into a finished university in which, along with philosophical and religious culture, there will be a fully equipped technical institute. So he talks a very good combination of spiritual philosophical approach with science and technology, and describing his plan of work for India, he says, in central India near Hazaribagh and other districts there can be yet had a fertile, well-watered, healthy land without much difficulty. So we see the insight of a visionary, and that's what Swamiji says. He concludes that Swami wanted that Indians should learn Western industrial methods and apply them to their conditions. He was not for limiting the industrial life to cottage industry. We have tried to interpret the Swamiji's according to our light and understanding. We do not claim to be infallible. There might be some shortcomings. So in a nutshell, Swami Vivekananda, who could not understand the problems of the people but also suggested such measures which are of extreme relevance even today. He was concerned about agriculture and its improvement and wanted to educate the farmers. He talks of industrialization of the country. At the same time, he pleads for the continuance of small-scale and cottage industry. He talks of trade but not aid. He suggests complete program of poverty eradication based on Vedantic philosophy. He at the same time teaches the universal oneness based on Advaita. And thus in Swamiji find a complete reformer who knew the philosophy, economics, politics, society, culture, religion and everything related to human life. It's very interesting. In 1953, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru used to write every fortnight a letter to his chief ministers. And one of letter on July 1953, when he was struggling with capitalism and socialism, he says that he refers to Vedanta and the Vedantic philosophy as a way out for that. And this I made an attempt to publish in one of the magazines as Vedantic philosophy, future orientation for economic development of India, as you know, Pandit Nehru envisaged. We all know about this, how Swami Vivekananda met Jamshedji Tata and how this got translated into action in a corporate. In 1893, in a boat that sailed from Yokohama to Vancouver, the two great Indians, one a monk and the other an industrialist, met for the first time. The monk was Swami Vivekananda, who was to take and interpret to the West more effectively than anyone else the religious and philosophical tradition of India. The industrialist was Jamshedji Tata, the father of Indian industry. As they got talking, Vivekananda explained his mission of preaching in the US, the universality of religion. Jamshedji said he was in search of equipment and technology that would build the steel industry and make India a strong industrial nation. Vivekananda blessed Jamshedji and remarked how wonderful it would be if we could combine the scientific and technological achievements of the West with the asceticism and humanism of India. They never met after that journey, but these words struck a chord in Jamshedji's heart. 5 years later, Jamshedji's response came in a letter to Swami Vivekananda. And the letter is there still today in Tata's website. We find this letter which says, Jamshedji writes to Swamiji on 23rd December 1898. I trust you remember me as a fellow traveler on your voyage from Japan to Chicago. I very much recall at this moment your views on the growth of this ascetic spirit in India and the duty not of destroying but of diverting it into useful channels. I recall these ideas in connection with my scheme of Research Institute of Science for India, of which you have doubtless heard or read. It seems to me that no better use can be made of the ascetic spirit than the establishment of monasteries or residential halls for men dominated by this spirit, where they should live an ordinary decency and devote their lives to the cultivation of sciences, natural and humanistic. I am of opinion that if such a crusade in favor of an asceticism of this kind were undertaken by a competent leader, it would greatly help asceticism, science and the good name of our common country, and I know not who would make a more fitting general of such a campaign than Vivekananda, and he was approaching Swamiji for this. Do you think you would care to apply yourself to the mission of galvanizing into life our ancient tradition in this respect? Perhaps you had better begin with the 5 pamphlet rousing our people in this matter. I should cheerfully defray all the expenses of publication. However, Swamiji could not take up this because he was busy establishing mission and could not accept the offer. But promptly he sent his disciple, Sister Nivedita, who then meets at Westminster Palsa, and then they lay down the entire plan of action. So, still today, when we talk about an ethical organization, Tatas are the one which come immediately to our mind. Swamiji also talks about corporate prosperity through evolution and involution. He says it is in the very nature of things to manifest themselves. The momentum is not from outside but comes from inside. He further says each evolution presupposes an involution. We know that the sum total of energy that is displayed in the universe is the same at all times, and that matter is indestructible. Everything begins, he adds, as it were from certain seeds, certain rudiments, certain fine forms, and becomes grosser and grosser as it develops, and then again it goes back to that fine form and subsidies. So Swamiji talks about how he can add this principle principle of evolution and evolution, and then we have seen the example of Tata's, which is a very good elaboration, a very good illustration of Swamiji's thought of evolution and involution towards corporate prosperity. So he also talks about the foundation of wisdom managerial practices in terms of duty with detachment. He talks about it's the way you look at your work, do your work, attitude towards duty. Every duty is holy and devotion to duty is the highest kind of worship. That's what he talks. He focuses on sincerity, freedom and love. Every successful man must have behind him somewhere tremendous sincerity, and that is the cause of his signal success in life. He talks about transcendental work, not a field of platform work. And the man who works through freedom and love cares nothing for result, that is the detachment. We should work through yoga, how we have heard Swamiji in pre-break session who talked so eloquently on that. So to conclude, in Los Angeles address in 1900, Vivekananda's concluding words were, let us perfect the means, the end will take care of itself. For the world can be good and pure, it is an effect, and we are the means. Therefore, let us purify ourselves, let us make ourselves perfect. So I end here. Let us try to make an attempt to live the values suggested by Swamiji. India needs more than ever.
Thank you, Professor Sengupta, for your able presentation. Now it is open for discussion. If any of you have any questions to ask, may raise.
Ma'am, thank you for your presentation. I would like to ask you about academic research work being done in this field, because I know from your work in IIM Calcutta that you were involved in guiding such research. Research in the field of spirituality and management. Can you tell us what is going on, what needs to be done?
Yeah. When I moved out from IIM Calcutta in 2005, the first international conference which I organized in 2007 along with Regent University USA on integrating spirituality and organizational leadership. Every alternate year we release the volume on day one of the proceedings, and that is the one area which we have been working on, integrating spirituality and organizational leadership. Thakur used to say, "Joto mat tato pod." So God is one. So this wisdom insights from various faith groups is the soul of this ISOL ventures. In 2010, we started working on Vedic foundations of Indian management. We are also working on the ontology of consciousness, integrating mathematics, physics, and spirituality. So many volumes have come out, and as I said that I took it as a call for work for me. I am fully surrendered to Thakur and his call wherever he wants, whatever he wants me to do, and that's how. But we have been doing a lot of work. We have come up with 2 journals, one international journal on spirituality and leadership, and another is International Journal of Vedic Foundation of Management. Both is being published by Bloomsbury Publishers, and I'll be happy, since after that I never got chance to be connected. Now I'll definitely share with them.
I would find, after listening to you, there are, we find many parallels between the Vivekananda's thought and also Mahatma Gandhi. You make a distinction very beautifully in the very beginning, a greed-based management and inspiration-based management is how you made a beautiful distinction. In this case, in this context, I would like to say that Gandhi also similarly he made a distinction between greed and need. Gandhi said that one could satisfy the needs of a human being, but one cannot satisfy the greed. So you must take care of the needs, but not the greed. And also at the end, while concluding your lecture, you people pointed out that the means should be taken care of, and the means is more important than the ends. So we find a very close parallels. But the other point that I would like to mention here is this. In the course of your presentation, you said that what is the use of bread-winning education? But my feeling is education should take care of the bread-winning also. Bread-winning is necessary, but that is not sufficient. And over and above the bread-winning, and the spiritual insights must be taken care of. And this also pointed out and emphasized very obviously by Vivekananda.
I would like to respond to your second question. When I said breadwinning education, it is like bread guiding my entire psyche, and then I lose touch with my inner self, and that is what Thakur taught us, that he wants to tell us that how I can be in my own inner self, I can establish myself on my inner self, and then I start working. If I'm doing that, I'm driven by conscience. So that was the ethos, but very beautifully said.
Ma'am, you spoke about the recent happenings that we are seeing around, the corporate fraud and the economic bust that's going on. I was just wondering if you could please let us know about the need for the paradigm change you spoke of. Can you give me a few concrete examples about corporates that have taken this shift and have included all-inclusive growth, and they are doing well?
Okay. I'll tell you, the Western, so-called, the Western education started, the management education, with the premier BE schools in IMC and IMA in two different locations at the same point of time. But before that also, we have examples of Wadia group of companies. Goyal is very famous. If you see the side Wadia group of companies, Murugappa Group, Adesh Godrej, Tatas, and they have been successfully working for Wadia more than 250 years, Tata for so many years, much before this took place. And if you see their managerial practices, you will find them deeply rooted into Indian traditional system. And you will find this, the duty orientation, what Swamiji talked about, it is there, taking care of the customers, those who have taken Goyal, this is how I came across Wadia Group. I wanted to write a case study on Goyal because it reminded me of Southwest Airlines. And then when I go to the site, it was like an eye-opener for me. Oh my God, they have been into so many years. So there are organizations. The need of the time is that we need to highlight those organizations which are spirit-centric organizations.
Madam, first, a very thought-provoking presentation. Thank you very much for that. I think since the 100 years or so that have passed, the days of Swamiji, I think there has been a shift in the way of a subject which is economics, which controls so much of whether it's management or corporate affairs or so. And I think right up to the times of economics like Kenneth Arrow, economics was of one kind. But from the days of Amartya Sen and many others, there is an ethical element which has been added to economics, and MIT and many other schools in Harvard have made a very strong comment about that. So the question is, do you have a place for all these? I'm sure you have somewhere. I mean, in all that you said, the various tasks, the books, the compendiums that you're compiling. I mean, the economics part, because economics is like is a very fundamental subject which cross-cuts from planning to management, from social affairs to to
because when
regional planning.
Mr. Sen, when we talk about business transformation through spiritual leadership, and that's where we talk about how in balanced scorecard, the technical instrument that the corporates use, how we can integrate values and ethics so that we create an environment where where we are able to, where people are able to take their own charges. I take this opportunity to share that into July 2013, I am publishing a volume on monasticism and organizational leadership. I take this opportunity to share that anyone who would like to write on Ramakrishna Mission, is most welcome. And I am putting thoughts from the different perspectives. The ashram culture, how is it working? How this initiation creates miracles? How we integrate that? How can we draw insights from that? And you see, business there is not a focus, but we need money to sustain. So it's a matter of focus. So all these things what you're talking about, that it is integrated in that. We have separate, where we talk about, there is what Amartya Sen talked about, and welfare economics and all those things, and the welfare-oriented monarchy system which prevail in India. So all those parts are the part of this compendium. Thank you very much.
I would like to say one thing. that is, we're talking about monastic life, the communistic way of life, non-exploitative, sharing not only the means of distribution, but even the production and consumption. In communistic society, only the distribution and production are controlled, but not consumption. In a monastic life, all the three are under regulation. If there is anywhere on earth this communistic setup, social setup, it is only in a monastery you will find it. Anyway, but my question, I would like to ask one question if nobody else has got any question to ask. What exactly do you mean by spirituality? We have been using the word spirituality frequently. I would like to know what exactly you mean by spirituality in the management context.
It's the Yoga Vedanta model, Vyavhar Adhyattam Uchyate. Vyavhar brings spirituality in your behavior, and that is think good, do good, and be good. It is like simplifying the whole process. It has nothing to do with the rituals, it has nothing to do with religion. It is compassion, love and truth, connecting with people with wholeheartedly, working with the people and being with the people.
I would like to point out the difference between in the concept of regarding the concept of spirituality in India means in Hinduism and non-Hindu or non-Indian religions and philosophies. This Swamiji understood this more than 100 years ago. The Western concept that depends upon the concept of personality. The Western concept of personality is personality consists of two entities, the body and the mind. The mind itself is, in English language, is known as the soul. It itself is known as the spirit. And so spirit, mind and soul mean same thing in all Western philosophies, in all non-Indian Hindu religion, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all religions, only two. This is known as the dichotomous theory of personality. So morality, spirituality means only the development of mind. There is hardly any distinction between spirituality and morality. So what you just now said, the respondent, to live, to do good and to be good and all that, that is spirituality. That is same as morality. Whereas in Indian concept of spirituality is human personality consists of three entities, body, mind, and apart from that, there is a third known as Atman. That is the source of all consciousness. Whole Western and non-Indian religions, consciousness is only a property of the mind. Thus, to be spiritual means to cultivate the mind, whereas for us, there is a third entity known as the Atman. That is the center of consciousness. To be spiritual means you have to transcend. You have to transcend the mind. So all the yogas, they are all meant to help people transcend the mind and realize the spirit. When Swamiji used the word spirituality, it is in this sense. That spiritual part of India, Swamiji said, Indian culture, the center of Indian culture is spirituality or religion. When he said, he mentioned it in this sense. This is as Marcia Elliott, the professor of head of the Department of History of Religions in Chicago University, in his famous book Yoga, he has pointed out his discovery of the Atman, center of consciousness, separate from mind, is India's greatest contribution. And Swamiji himself, more than 100 years ago, pointed out this. So this is Swamiji, it is the understanding that alone, making a stand on the Atman, that alone enables the management people, managers and all that to remain unaffected by the turmoils around, to take correct decisions, deal with the problems. So unless there is a sense of transcendence, unless we find a center, a center of peace, a center of ego-free, tension-free, a space beyond thoughts, that is what actually Swamiji meant by spirituality. Spirituality meant this in India. So some sort of yoga is necessary. The purpose of yoga is only to enable people to transcend the mind and realize the center. So this is the basic idea of Swamiji about the spirituality. There is a lot of confusion about spirituality with mind and mental development and morality. Just I wanted to point out this, that's all. So our time is over.